Do you think it's a coincidence that Chris just happened to park his truck directly in front of Nate's camera? If you got the immediate feeling that the whole thing seems staged, it's probably because it is. If you wanted to convince the public of something without actually showing anything and with only circumstantial evidence, that is one way to do it. And sure, law enforcement and the mainstream media could put out a news story about it, but that wouldn't pull at the heartstrings of people enough to push their agenda. They have to do it psychologically. Many people believe they are watching Chris load the bodies of his family into his truck. But do they believe this because there is actual evidence that proves this, or is it because they were told that's what was happening? And it wasn't just someone that told them, it was law enforcement and the mainstream media who fed them the narrative. So it automatically makes it credible, right? I hope your answer was no to that question, because evidence that you can see with your own two eyes is what makes it credible. Just because something might appear a certain way, it doesn't make the claim true, and we all know appearances can be deceiving. There are people who know that the mainstream media outlets are there to push an agenda, narrative, or some sort of propaganda onto the public. Then there are others who believe that the information the mainstream media puts out is 100% factual and true. So why would anyone question the authenticity of the video footage in the first place? A lot of people wouldn't, but they should. This is why it's so important for people to think for themselves, think logically, and ask questions. Shanann's social media, body cam footage, discovery documents, video footage, etc. were released to the public to pull people in psychologically. By watching all of Shanann's videos and reading about her entire life made people feel as if they knew her and the girls. The more horrific the case, the more emotional and enraged people become. And when people are upset or angry, they usually react with their emotions instead of thinking logically or rational. And that is only a small portion of the psychological aspect in all of it. There have been an overwhelming amount of coincidences in this case, and I already mentioned one. But I would like to point out a few more and let you know that there is no such thing as a coincidence when it comes to the Watts case. For instance, do you think it's a coincidence that Kessinger was contracted to Anadarko and started working there just a few months before her and Chris started the affair? Do you think it's a coincidence that Shanann just happened to leave her husband to go to North Carolina for 6 weeks, which conveniently opened up the opportunity for Chris and Kessinger to start their affair? Do you think it's a coincidence that Shanann just happened to have a doctor's appointment that she missed on the same day that the girls were supposed to start school and the day that Nicole Atkinson was worried about her best friend, even though she didn't even know her birthday or age or even if she was in her 20s or 30s for that matter, and just happens to call in a welfare check on the same day that Chris planned the murders? Do you think it was just a coincidence that Chris and Troy McCoy arranged to meet about the fire stick in the grocery store parking lot? And who just happened to get the phone call about the leak at Survey 319 and conveniently gave Chris the opportunity to go straight to the oil tanks instead of going to the office first like he usually did? Do you think it's a coincidence Chris made every possible mistake a person could make when committing a murder? He left multiple items at Survey 319 just out in the open. Not one or two items, but multiple items. Kind of like that shooting that happened prior to the Watts case. The alleged shooter had over 20 guns just laid out all over his hotel room. Was this done to convince everyone that he was the shooter and no one else, but without actually having any physical evidence proving that he was the one that actually did the shooting? Kind of similar to Chris leaving all of the evidence out in the open at Survey 319. They wanted to make it easy for law enforcement to find the gravesite and the location of the bodies with their drone and without having to do any actual crime scene investigating. No cadaver dog search, no manpower. Chris might as well have left a big X for law enforcement. And how convenient that Chris just gave in after 4 hours and told them that the girls were in the tanks. Why would Chris go through all that trouble of getting rid of his entire family to be with his mistress just to give up everything after a few hours of being interrogated, or lack thereof? We know that Chris didn't have enough time to do all of the things the official narrative claims he did. If he didn't have enough time, it's probably because it didn't happen. Don't you think it's odd that Chris showed up to the house after he just allegedly murdered his entire family, dug a grave, and disposed of his family, but didn't have a speck of dirt or sweat drop on him? Not only that, but the guy looked like he just got a full 8 hours of sleep the night before. I can't imagine he got much sleep when he was on the phone with his alleged mistress and with his adrenaline pumping. Do you think it's a coincidence that Kessinger fell off the face of the earth and no one has come out and claimed they know her? No friends, coworkers, family members, ex-boyfriends, or enemies of Kessinger's? She obviously does not give off a great first impression, so I would be shocked if she didn't piss anybody off at some point in her life. What are the odds the same thing happened in a different orchestrated murder case? The girlfriend of the alleged shooter should have been investigated, but she wasn't. She was hardly questioned, even though the man she was dating wired her $100,000 just before the shooting. Well, guess what happened to her? We don't know because she also disappeared into thin air or fell off the face of the earth. There were a few photos released of her and the alleged shooter and a few other ones. No one ever came out and claimed to have known her. No one with a 140 IQ is going to dump bodies at a location that is leased by the company they work for. And not just any company, but an oil and gas company run by very powerful people and who are associated with even more powerful people. Unless the oil company is in on it. And I don't mean in on it as in they didn't want the bad publicity if it went to trial, so they forced Chris to take a plea deal. Money is power, and these big oil companies are the ones in control. If they didn't want any of this information getting out or the bad publicity, I guarantee you the body cam footage, the discovery, this three-ring circus called the Watts case would be non-existent.